They mocked the engineer for building tunnels between the houses, but winter shows who was right. Nathan Miller felt his chest tighten when he caught sight of the first houses of Pine Ridge after 15 years away from there. What should have been a triumphant return for the successful engineer had turned into a desperate mission, carrying with him plans that no one could understand. It was then that he first mentioned the tunnels. The meeting at the town council turned into an uproar when Nathan explained that he wanted to connect all the houses in the community through underground passageways. People looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Tunnels? What's this all about, son?" asked Mr. Arthur, the mayor, shaking his head. "Do you think our Pine Ridge is the Chicago subway?" Nathan took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. At 35, he had already faced bigger challenges in his career, but he never imagined it would be so hard to convince the people of the place where he was born. "Mr. Mayor, do you remember the winter of 2010? When Mrs. Beatrice was stranded in her house for 3 days because she couldn't get out due to the snow?" Silence filled the room. Everyone remembered the 82-year-old woman who barely survived those terrible days without her heart medication and with little food in the house. "That was an exception," the mayor retorted, annoyed. "A storm that doesn't happen every year." "But it can happen again, and this time with more intensity," Nathan insisted, opening a folder full of documents. "I studied meteorology in addition to civil engineering. The data shows we're in a climate change that can bring much more severe winters to our region." Mrs. Gertrude, owner of the local grocery store, watched Nathan carefully. She remembered the shy boy who used to buy candy at her store, always very polite and smart. Now she saw a determined man, dressed in simple clothes, but that showed a certain success in life. "And how would these tunnels work?" she asked, causing murmurs in the room. Nathan perked up when he realized someone was showing real interest. He opened a detailed map of the village and began to explain his project with the passion of someone who truly believed in the idea. They would be passageways 2 meters high by 1.5 meters wide, with their own lighting and ventilation system. We'd start by connecting the homes of the elderly and those that are most isolated when it snows. "And who would pay for this madness?" interrupted Sterling, the most influential councilman in town. "I would cover the initial costs myself," Nathan answered, surprising everyone. "I have enough savings to start the project and prove that it works." The meeting went on for another 2 hours, with heated discussions and many doubts. Nathan presented calculations, technical drawings, and meteorological studies, but the resistance was evident on the faces of almost everyone present. When he left the town council that night, Nathan carried in his chest the bitter feeling of not having convinced anyone. The narrow streets of Pine Ridge seemed smaller than in his childhood memories, and the surrounding mountains still imposing under the starry sky of the Rocky Mountains. He stayed at Mrs. Martha's Inn, the only accommodation option in the village. The 65-year-old woman received him with a warm smile, but Nathan noticed the curiosity in her eyes. "So you're the Nathan who wants to build tunnels here in the village?" she asked while serving coffee in the small but cozy kitchen. "News travels fast around here," he replied with a sad smile. "It always did. You must remember that from the time you lived here," said Mrs. Martha, sitting across from him. "Tell me the whole story about these tunnels. Why would someone invest so much money in something like that?" Nathan looked out the kitchen window and saw the lights of the houses scattered across the village. Each light represented a family, people he had known in his childhood, and who now saw him as a stranger with crazy ideas. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us folks who are just starting out. Now continuing, "Miss Martha, do you remember my grandmother Evelyn?" asked Nathan, stirring his coffee without taking a sip. "Of course, God rest her soul. She spent her last years alone in that house at the end of the street by the church. In the winter of 2008, when I was 20 and studying away from home, she was stranded for an entire week. No one could reach her because of the snow and ice. When they finally got to her, she was very weak, dehydrated and hypothermic. Miss Martha lowered her eyes, remembering those difficult days. She never fully recovered from that," Nathan continued, his voice choking up. Little by little she lost her strength, growing frailer. She always said she was afraid of winter coming again. "I understand," Miss Martha murmured, gently touching Nathan's hand. "But even so, the tunnels seem like a very, how should I put it, over-the-top solution." Nathan got up and walked over to the window again. Outside, the temperature was already starting to drop, a sign that winter was approaching earlier than usual. "Miss Martha, I've spent the last 15 years building tunnels and underground passages in big cities. I know exactly how to do this safely and efficiently. What I'm proposing here is nothing compared to the projects I've already carried out." "But why spend your money here? You could do this anywhere bigger, where they'd appreciate you more," she asked, genuinely curious. "Because this is my home," Nathan replied simply. "And because I know it can save lives when the harsh winter hits. It's not a matter of if, but when." The next morning, Nathan went out to walk through the village and do a detailed survey of the land. He carried a folder with measuring equipment and notebooks, drawing attention wherever he went. People watched him from their windows, and some came over to talk, driven by curiosity. Nathan patiently explained his project to everyone who showed interest, but the reactions were always similar: astonishment, mistrust, and skepticism. At Mike's auto repair shop, he stopped to greet his old schoolmate. "Nathan, I heard you came back with some crazy plans to build tunnels here in the village," said Mike, wiping his grease-stained hands on a rag. "They're not crazy, Mike. They're necessary," Nathan replied, already used to that kind of reaction. "Dude, you know we barely have enough money around here to keep the roads in good shape, let alone dig tunnels underground." "That's exactly why I said I'd pay for it out of my own pocket to prove it works." Mike shook his head in disbelief. "And what if it doesn't work out? You'll be out of pocket, and the village will be full of holes in the ground." "It will work," Nathan said with conviction. "I have enough experience to guarantee it." During the afternoon, Nathan visited a few houses to take more precise measurements. At Miss Beatrice's house, the elderly woman who had been stranded in 2010, he was received with more openness. "Young man, if you think those tunnels can help, I support your idea," she said, watching Nathan take notes in the backyard. "That week I was trapped here was the biggest scare of my life." "Miss Beatrice, you would be one of the first to be connected," Nathan explained, showing her on paper what the route would look like. "Your tunnel would lead straight to Miss Gertrude's house, which is in the center of the village." "And would it be safe? It wouldn't collapse or anything?" "Completely safe. I use the same tunnel construction techniques as subway systems, just on a smaller scale." Miss Beatrice offered Nathan a cup of tea, and they talked for nearly an hour. She told him how terrible it had been to be alone, unable to leave the house, hearing only the strong wind outside and watching the snow pile up higher and higher. "I actually thought I'd spend my last days there, all alone," she said, wiping away a tear. "If your tunnels can keep other people from going through that, then you have my blessing." The support from Miss Beatrice encouraged Nathan, but he knew he would need much more to convince the entire community. On the way back to the inn, he stopped at the grocery store to pick up some supplies. "So you've really decided to go through with this idea?" asked Miss Gertrude, jotting down the items in an old notebook. "More determined than ever," Nathan replied. "Look, I don't know anything about engineering, but you seem like a serious person. If you're sure about what you're doing—" "I am, Miss Gertrude, and you would be a key part of the project, since your store is right in the center of town." Miss Gertrude stopped writing and looked straight at Nathan. "What do you mean?" "Your store could serve as the central hub of the tunnel network. People would be able to get here even during the worst storms, to pick up groceries and medicine." The idea clearly interested the shopkeeper, who began asking more specific questions about how the whole system would work. "And what if a medical emergency happens?" she asked. The tunnel would also connect to Dr. Harrison's house. He could see patients or guide treatments, even when the streets were impassable. Dr. Harrison was the retired doctor who still handled emergencies in town. Nathan knew that gaining his support would be crucial to earning credibility with the residents. The next morning, Nathan went to find the doctor's makeshift office in his own home. Dr. Harrison, a 70-year-old man with long gray hair, received him in an office full of old medical books. "Young Nathan, I've heard about your project. Interesting, but it seems like an unnecessary expense for a problem that rarely happens. Dr. Harrison, how many medical emergencies have you missed because you couldn't reach the patient due to bad weather? Nathan asked directly. The doctor grew thoughtful for a few seconds. There were indeed some difficult times, I admit. In the winter of 2015, you couldn't reach Mr. Bill when he had a heart attack because the road was impassable due to the ice, could you? Doctor. Harrison lowered his gaze, clearly troubled by the memory. Bill didn't make it, that's true, but I can't say he would have survived even if I had made it in time. But we would have given him a chance, Nathan said softly. And we would have spared the family the feeling that we didn't do everything we could. The doctor stood up and walked to the window, watching the first storm clouds forming on the horizon. Would your tunnels really work in a medical emergency? Dr. Harrison, I've designed evacuation systems for underground hospitals. I know exactly how to make sure a stretcher can move through the tunnels safely and quickly. And you would cover all the costs? The initial costs, yes, to prove that the system works. Dr. Harrison returned to his chair and sat in silence for a few minutes, clearly weighing the proposal. Nathan, I'm going to be honest with you. From a medical standpoint, your idea doesn't seem absurd to me. I've lost patients because I couldn't get there in time, and it still haunts me to this day. So you would support the project? Yes, I would, but you need to understand that you'll face a lot of resistance from the other residents, especially from the mayor. Why the mayor specifically? Dr. Harrison looked around as if someone might be listening, then lowered his voice. Arthur has a very lucrative contract with a snow removal company. They make good money every winter clearing the village streets. If your tunnels work, that contract could be challenged. Nathan felt his stomach drop when he heard that. He had never considered that there could be financial interests behind the opposition to the project. Are you sure about that, sir? I am, and I'm not the only one who knows. Sterling, the town councilman, is also in on the deal. That revelation completely changed Nathan's perspective on the difficulties he would face. It wasn't just about convincing skeptics, but about taking on established economic interests. Dr. Harrison, even knowing all this, would you still publicly support me? I would. I'm a doctor, not a politician. My priority is the lives I can save. With the doctor's support secured, Nathan felt more confident about seeking other allies in the community. His next stop was the local school, where he wanted to talk to Sarah, the teacher, a 40-year-old woman who had always had a reputation as a progressive in the village. Sarah was organizing teaching materials when Nathan arrived at the school. The simple but well-kept building housed 2 classrooms where the children and teenagers of the region studied. "Nathan, what a surprise to see you here," said Sarah, getting up to greet him. "Sarah, I came to talk about the tunnel project. I'd like to hear your opinion." "I've heard about it, of course. The whole village is talking about it. It's a pretty bold idea." "Bold but necessary," Nathan corrected. "As an educator, you must understand the importance of long-term planning." Sarah gestured to a chair for Nathan to sit down, showing interest in going into more detail. "Explain how it would work in more detail, especially thinking about the children at the school." Nathan opened his maps and technical drawings, showing how the school would be connected to the tunnel network. "Sarah, imagine if a child gets sick during a severe blizzard and needs urgent medical care. With the tunnels, we could get them to Dr. Harrison, or even to a point where an ambulance could pick them up." The teacher studied the drawings closely, asking relevant questions about safety and maintenance of the system. "And wouldn't the children be at risk if they played in the tunnels? There would be safety gates, and access would be controlled by the responsible adults in each household." "Nathan, can I ask a more personal question?" "Of course. Why are you investing so much time and money into this? What's your real motivation?" Nathan sighed, bracing himself to tell once again the story he had shared with only a few people. "Sarah, when I was a kid, my grandmother Evelyn lived alone here in the village. In the last years of her life, I was studying away and only visited during the holidays. In the winter of 2008, she was stranded during a storm and nearly lost her life." Sarah listened in silence, sensing the emotion in Nathan's voice. "Back then, I was just a student and couldn't do anything to help. I promised myself that if I ever had the knowledge and the resources, I'd do something so that no family would ever have to go through that. And now you have that knowledge and those resources. Exactly. I spent 15 years specializing in underground construction precisely with projects like this in mind. Sarah closed the maps and looked directly into Nathan's eyes. You have my full support. As a teacher, I know that education also means thinking about the future of our community. With another supporter secured, Nathan felt encouraged to take the next step, finding workers willing to start the excavations. He knew finding skilled labor in the village wouldn't be easy, but he could train a few interested people. At Mike's workshop, he asked if he knew anyone who might be interested in learning about tunnel construction. "Man, you're really not going to give up on this idea, are you?" said Mike, shaking his head. "I'm not going, and I need people willing to work with me. Look, there's Tyler, Mrs. Martha's nephew. He's been unemployed for a few months, and he's someone you can trust. Maybe he'd be interested." Tyler was 28 years old and had worked in construction before moving back to the village. When Nathan approached him, the young man showed curiosity about the project. "I've never worked with tunnels, but building underground can't be too different from pouring foundations, right?" asked Tyler. "There are some important differences, but I can teach you everything you need to know," replied Nathan. "And how much would you pay someone to work with you?" Nathan mentioned a figure that made Tyler's eyes light up. It was significantly more than he could earn from odd jobs around the village. "When do we start?" "As soon as I get the necessary permits, or at least some of them." Nathan knew he would need at least a few official permissions before starting the excavations. He scheduled a new meeting with the mayor to try to reach a more specific agreement. Mr. Arthur received him in his office with a clearly annoyed expression. The desk was covered in papers and documents, giving the impression of a heavy workload. "Nathan, I hope you came here to tell me you've given up on this tunnel idea." "Quite the opposite, Mr. Arthur. I came to propose a deal." "A deal? Let me build tunnels connecting just 5 houses. If it works well through next winter, we expand to the rest of the village with official support." The mayor leaned back in his chair, weighing the proposal. "And what if it doesn't work?" "I'll cover all the costs of removal and restoring the land myself." "Which 5 houses?" "Mrs. Beatrice, Dr. Harrison, Mrs. Gertrude, the school, and my own lodging at Mrs. Martha's boarding house." The mayor sat in silence for several minutes, clearly pondering the offer. Nathan could see he was torn between the temptation to accept an agreement that would limit the project and the fear that even a small demonstration might prove the tunnel's effectiveness. "Nathan, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't believe this is necessary, and I think you're throwing your money away. But will you let me try with those 5 houses?" "I will, as long as you sign a liability agreement for any damage or accident." Nathan felt a mix of relief and unease. He finally had official authorization, even if limited, but he was taking on an enormous responsibility if anything went wrong. "I accept the conditions." "Then let's make it official." They spent the rest of the afternoon drafting an official document that allowed Nathan to begin the excavations connecting the 5 specified properties. The deadline was the end of autumn, before winter arrived in full force. When he left the town hall with the signed document, Nathan felt as if he had won the first battle of a long war. Now the challenge would be to carry out the project quickly and without mistakes, knowing the whole village would be watching his every move. At Mrs. Martha's boarding house, he found a letter that had arrived for him. It was from his ex-wife Claire, who had somehow found out where he was. "Nathan, I heard you went back to that village, and you're involved in some crazy tunnel project. Please reconsider. You're throwing away everything you built in Chicago. There's still time to come back and resume your normal career. Claire." Nathan crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. Claire had never understood his most ambitious dreams, always preferring the security of conventional, well-paid projects. It was one of the main reasons their marriage had ended 2 years ago. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Nathan and Tyler began the work of measuring and marking the excavation points. The first tunnel would connect Mrs. Beatrice's house to Mrs. Gertrude's grocery store, a distance of approximately 150 meters. "Where do we start?" asked Tyler, carrying the measuring equipment. "At Mrs. Beatrice's house. It's the highest point on the property, so gravity will work in our favor for drainage." Throughout the morning they took precise measurements, analyzed the soil type, and identified potential underground obstacles such as pipes or electrical cables. Mrs. Beatrice watched the work from her window, visibly excited about the activity. From time to time she offered water and coffee to the two men. "Young man, how long until it's ready?" she asked during a break. "If all goes well, the tunnel from here to Mrs. Gertrude's will be ready in 3 weeks, Nathan replied. "And will it really be safe?" "I'm not afraid to use it, but I want to be sure." "Mrs. Beatrice, when it's done, I'll be the first to go through the tunnel. I wouldn't build anything I wouldn't use myself." In the afternoon, they began the actual excavation. Nathan had brought some specialized tools from Chicago, but most of the work would be done with basic equipment adapted for the situation. The first shovel of dirt officially marked the beginning of the project. Nathan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he watched the soil being removed. After so many months of planning, he was finally putting his ideas into practice. Tyler proved to be a dedicated worker and a quick learner. Nathan explained each step of the process, from the excavation technique to the methods for reinforcing the tunnel walls. "The most important part is keeping the structure reinforced at all times," Nathan explained, showing how to secure the wooden beams. "We can never leave a section unsupported for too long. And what if we hit rock or a really big root? We have the equipment to handle that. The key is to never force things or improvise solutions." By the end of the first day of excavation, they had advanced about 8 meters. Nathan made a point of documenting everything with photos and detailed notes, knowing he would need to prove every step of the process if questioned. During the evening at the boarding house, Nathan reviewed all his calculations and planned the next day's work. Mrs. Martha approached with a cup of hot chocolate. "How was the first day?" "Better than I expected. Tyler is doing really well, and the terrain is more cooperative than I imagined." "And the folks in the village, how are they reacting?" Nathan had noticed that several people had passed by Mrs. Beatrice's house during the day, obviously curious to see how the work was progressing. "There's still a lot of skepticism, but at least now they're seeing it's something real, not just talk." "Do you really think it's going to work?" "I'm sure of it, Mrs. Martha. And when it works, this village is going to change completely." In the second week of excavation, Nathan and Tyler had established an efficient routine. They worked from 7 in the morning to 5 in the evening, with regular breaks for rest and hydration. The tunnel advanced at a steady pace of about 12 meters per day. Nathan had calculated all the angles, so the passage would have a gentle slope, allowing natural water drainage while keeping it easy to walk through. That was when they hit the first serious obstacle, an old water pipe that didn't appear on any town hall map. "Now what?" asked Tyler, staring at the iron pipe that ran exactly along the planned tunnel route. "We'll have to shift the route slightly," Nathan replied, already doing mental calculations. "It's not a serious problem, but it'll set us back about 2 days." They spent the rest of the morning recalculating the route and making new test drillings to make sure they wouldn't come across any other unforeseen obstacles. During lunch at Mrs. Beatrice's house, Nathan explained the situation to her. "Does that mean the tunnel won't come out exactly where we planned? It'll come out about 3 meters further to the left than originally planned, but that doesn't affect the functionality at all." "And will it take longer to finish?" "Just 2 or 3 extra days, that's all." Mrs. Beatrice seemed at ease with the change, but Nathan knew that any delay could be used by his critics as evidence that the project wasn't viable. In the late afternoon, as he was putting away the tools, Nathan received an unexpected visit. Councilman Sterling, accompanied by 2 other men he didn't recognize. "Nathan, I need to talk to you," Sterling said, in a tone that was clearly not friendly. "Sure, Sterling. What is this about?" "We've been receiving complaints about the excavation, excessive noise, dust, disruption for the neighbors." Nathan looked around, confused. Mrs. Beatrice's house was in an area with few nearby homes, and they had been careful to make as little noise as possible. "What kind of complaints specifically?" Noise from the tools, dirt being moved on the streets, things like that. Sterling, can you show me who exactly complained? I'd like to talk to these people to resolve any problem. Sterling was clearly bothered by the direct question. No need to name names, I'm just warning you that if the complaints continue, the town hall can cancel your authorization. Nathan realized that this visit was more of an intimidation attempt than a legitimate complaint. The two men accompanying Sterling didn't say a word, but their presence clearly was meant to pressure him. Sterling, I have official authorization signed by the mayor. If there are real problems, I can adjust my working methods, but I need to know exactly what the problems are. You've been warned, Sterling said, turning his back and walking away with his companions. After they left, Mrs. Beatrice approached Nathan, visibly worried. Nathan, I think you should be careful. I think you should be. Sterling isn't the type to make empty threats. Mrs. Beatrice, have you had any problem with noise or dust from our work? Problem? What problem? You all work as quiet as mice. Sometimes I don't even notice you're here. That's what I figured. That night, Nathan talked about the incident with Dr. Harrison, who confirmed his suspicions. Nathan, this has nothing to do with noise or dust. It's an attempt to sabotage your project before it proves it works. But why would they do that? I already explained about the financial interests involved. Besides, if your project succeeds, it'll make some people look incompetent for not having thought of it before. Nathan realized he would have to speed up the work if he wanted to complete at least the first tunnel before the pressure intensified. He decided to work on weekends too and hire one more assistant. Mike from the mechanics shop recommended his cousin Jake, who had experience digging artesian wells. Nathan interviewed the young man and decided to hire him on the spot. Jake, I need to make it clear that this job might have some political complications, Nathan explained. Some people in town don't support the project. Political complications don't bother me. I need the work and I like challenges, replied Jake, a 25-year-old young man who didn't look easily intimidated. With 3 people working, the pace of the excavation increased significantly. In a week, they completed another 40 meters, reaching almost the halfway point between Mrs. Beatrice's house and the grocery store. That's when the first accident happened. Tyler was reinforcing a section of the tunnel walls when a wooden beam suddenly shifted, hitting him on the shoulder and knocking him to the ground. "Tyler!" shouted Nathan, running to help him. "I think I hurt my shoulder," said Tyler, trying to get up, but feeling a lot of pain. Nathan and Jake managed to get him out of the tunnel and take him straight to Dr. Harrison. The doctor examined the injury and diagnosed a serious contusion, but no fractures. "You'll need to rest for at least a week," said Dr. Harrison, immobilizing Tyler's shoulder with a sling. "Doctor, please don't mention this accident to anyone yet," Nathan asked. "At least not until I can properly explain what happened." "Nathan, I can't lie if someone asks me directly, but I'm not going to go spreading the news either." Nathan knew that word of the accident would quickly reach Sterling and the mayor. He needed to be prepared to justify that accidents are common on any job site and that he had taken all the necessary precautions. As expected, the next morning Sterling showed up at the excavation site accompanied by Mr. Arthur. "Nathan, I heard there was an accident here yesterday," the mayor said with a serious expression. "Yes, there was, Mr. Arthur. Tyler got hurt when a beam shifted, but he's already been seen by Dr. Harrison and he's recovering well." "What kind of injury?" asked Sterling. "A shoulder contusion, nothing serious." "Nathan, this proves your project is dangerous," said the mayor. "I can't allow you to keep putting people at risk." "Mr. Arthur, accidents happen on any construction site. The important thing is that we have all the proper safety equipment and procedures. Even so, I'm going to have to suspend the permit until a more thorough evaluation is done." Nathan felt the ground give way beneath his feet. After nearly 3 weeks of intense work, he was being forced to stop exactly when he had found the ideal rhythm. "How long would that evaluation take?" "It depends. Maybe a few weeks." Nathan knew that a few weeks would mean the end of autumn and the start of winter. If he couldn't complete at least the first tunnel before the first snowstorm, he would lose the chance to prove his efficiency. "Mr. Arthur, could I suggest an immediate technical inspection? I'll bring in an outside safety engineer to evaluate all the procedures." The mayor looked at Sterling, who shook his head. No, Nathan. The decision is made. Work is suspended. That night, Nathan met with Mrs. Beatrice, Dr. Harrison, Mrs. Gertrude, and Sarah to discuss the situation. They were all outraged by the town hall's decision. "This is political persecution," said Sarah. "Anyone can see that you were working very carefully." "The problem is they don't want this project to succeed," added Dr. Harrison, "and they'll use any excuse to stop it." "Nathan, you can't give up now," said Mrs. Beatrice. "You've already come almost halfway." "I don't intend to give up, Mrs. Beatrice, but I need to find a legal way to continue." Nathan spent the whole night studying the documents he had signed with the town hall, looking for some loophole that would allow him to challenge the suspension. The next morning, he sought out a lawyer in the neighboring town. Dr. Vance, a specialist in administrative law, carefully reviewed the entire case. "Nathan, technically they do have the right to suspend the work for safety reasons, but the way they went about it can be challenged." "What do you mean?" "No proper technical inspection was carried out. The decision seems to have been made based solely on the accident, without evaluating whether the safety procedures were correct." "Does that mean I can challenge the decision?" "Yes, you can, but it will take time. Perhaps more time than you have available before winter." Nathan left the lawyer's office with mixed feelings. On one hand, he had a legal basis to contest the suspension. On the other, he knew time was running out fast. Back in Pine Ridge, he found Tyler already feeling better and eager to get back to work. "Nathan, my shoulder is doing much better now. I can go back to work as early as tomorrow." "Tyler, the problem isn't your recovery. The town hall suspended the project." "Suspended? Why?" Nathan explained the whole situation, watching the disappointment form on the young man's face. "So what now? Are we just going to sit around?" "I'm looking into some legal options, but it could take a while." "Nathan, can I suggest something?" Tyler said, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Sure. What if we continued the work at night, quietly, without making any noise?" Tyler's suggestion was tempting but risky. If they were discovered, Nathan could face serious legal consequences. "Tyler, that would be illegal. If they found out, I'd lose any chance of officially restarting the project. But if we don't keep going, you'll lose the chance to prove it works before winter." Nathan fell silent, weighing the limited options he had. He knew Tyler was right about the timing, but he was also aware of the risks involved. That was when Sarah appeared, as if she had been listening to the conversation. "Nathan, can I speak with you in private?" They stepped a few feet away, and Sarah spoke in a low voice. "I talked to some people in town. There's more support for your project than you think. A lot of people are just afraid to speak out publicly against the mayor. That's good to know, but it doesn't solve the legal problem." "Maybe it does. If we can organize a petition with lots of signatures asking for the work to continue, that might pressure the town hall into reconsidering." Sarah's idea made sense. Nathan knew popular pressure could be effective in a small community like Pine Ridge. "Sarah, do you think you could organize that?" "I've already started. Mrs. Martha, Mrs. Beatrice, Dr. Harrison, and several other people have already committed to signing and gathering more support." Nathan felt a spark of hope reignite. Maybe there was still a way to win this political battle. "How much time would you need to gather a significant number of signatures?" "A week, maybe 10 days. "Sarah, if you can pull that off, it would be fantastic. But I need to warn you that there could be backlash against anyone who publicly supports the project." "Nathan, half the people I talk to have already dealt with some kind of trouble because of the harsh winters. They understand that your project can mean the difference between life and, well, between being fine or going through serious hardship." Over the following week, Sarah went through town discreetly, talking to families and explaining the benefits of the tunnel project. Nathan followed the work from a distance, avoiding too much exposure so he wouldn't hurt the campaign. Mrs. Martha became one of the project's biggest supporters, telling everyone she knew how Nathan had saved her granddaughter's life years ago when she almost drowned in the creek during a flood. "That boy was always special," she said to anyone who would listen. "He grew up here, knows our problems, and now he comes back with a solution. Who are we to not give him a chance?" Dr. Harrison used his medical authority to convince families about the health and safety aspects of the tunnels. He explained how emergencies would be easier to handle and how elderly people could keep more independence during the winter months. Mrs. Gertrude offered her grocery store as a collection point for signatures, leaving the petition on the counter where all customers could see it and sign. The movement gained momentum when Professor Collins, from the neighboring school that served children from several rural communities in the region, came to Pine Ridge specifically to learn about the project. "Professor Nathan, I've studied your professional background," she said, analyzing the technical drawings. "Your projects in Chicago are truly impressive. Why did you decide to do something like this in such a small town?" "Professor Collins, sometimes the smallest places are the ones that most need innovative solutions. And this is my home. Could your project be replicated in other rural communities in the region?" "Certainly. If it works well here, it can be adapted for any place that faces similar climate problems." The conversation with Collins gave Nathan a broader perspective on the potential of his project. It wasn't just about helping Pine Ridge, but about creating a model that could benefit dozens of other communities. Collins decided to publicly support the project, writing an open letter that was distributed around town and sent to regional authorities. "As an educator and specialist in rural development, I recognize in engineer Nathan Miller's project a pioneering initiative that can revolutionize the way small communities deal with climate adversity. Projects like this deserve support, not unnecessary bureaucratic obstacles." Collins's letter made an impact, especially because she was known and respected throughout the region. Several people who were still undecided took a stand in favor of the project after reading her recommendation. At the end of the first week of the campaign, Sarah had collected 42 signatures from adults, representing more than 60% of the town's families. It was much more significant support than Nathan had expected. "Sarah, this is incredible," he said, reviewing the list of names. "Some of these people I never imagined would support the project." "Nathan, do you know what surprised me the most? Several people said they always thought the project was interesting, but were afraid to speak up because of political pressure." "Political pressure?" "Yes. Apparently Sterling has been making veiled threats against those who support your tunnels. He said that anyone who opposes the town hall's interests could have trouble getting permits, authorizations, things like that." Nathan was outraged to learn about that kind of blackmail, but also admired the courage of the people who signed anyway. "So what now? How do we use this petition?" "We'll present it formally to the mayor demanding a new review of the work suspension." "Do you think he'll give in to public pressure?" "If he doesn't, at least it will be clear that he's acting against the will of the majority of the community." The following Monday, Sarah, Nathan, Dr. Harrison, and Martha went to the town hall to present the petition. Arthur received them with obvious ill will. "Arthur, we have a petition signed by more than 60% of the town's adults asking for the resumption of the tunnel project," Sarah said, handing over the document. The mayor quickly flipped through the petition, showing no real interest in the names or content. "Sarah, people sometimes don't understand technical safety issues. My responsibility is to protect everyone, even against uninformed public decisions." "But Arthur, was there an adequate technical evaluation of the safety procedures?" asked Dr. Harrison. "The evaluation is being conducted." "By whom? When did it start? When will it be ready?" Nathan insisted. The mayor was visibly uncomfortable with the specific questions. "That's none of your business. The decision has been made." "Arthur, with all due respect, this authoritarian attitude is not consistent with a democratic administration," said Sarah, using a firm tone that surprised everyone. "Sarah, watch your words. You're a public employee, and you must respect authority. I'm a tenured teacher, and I have the right to freedom of speech, and as a citizen, I have the right to question decisions that affect my community." The tension in the room quickly escalated. Nathan could tell the mayor was feeling cornered and might make even more drastic decisions if pushed too hard. "Mr. Arthur, we're just asking for a new evaluation based on the facts and the community support," Nathan said, trying to ease the tension. "The answer is no, and if there's any attempt to continue the project without authorization, there will be legal consequences." They left the town hall with the feeling that they had lost an important battle. But Sarah was not ready to give up just yet. "Nathan, I'm going to the Department of Justice to report an abuse of power. Sarah, that could take months to resolve, but it could create enough pressure to make him reconsider his position, and it could also result in retaliation against you and others who support the project. Sarah grew thoughtful for a few moments. Nathan, do you have another idea? Nathan had been weighing a risky alternative since the night before. He knew it could work, but it could also lead to serious consequences. I do have an idea, but it's risky and I need to think it through more carefully. Over the following days, Nathan carefully analyzed his legal situation and his options. He consulted again with his lawyer, Dr. Vance, and studied similar precedents in other regions. His conclusion was that he had a few legal alternatives, but all of them would take longer than the time he had before winter. If he wanted to prove the tunnel's effectiveness in the next snow season, he would need to make a drastic decision. That was when Tyler brought him some surprising news. Nathan, I found out something that might interest you. What is it? I talked to Bill, who works at the town hall. He told me there's no technical evaluation being done at all. The mayor lied to you. Nathan wasn't entirely surprised by the information, but having confirmation of the lie significantly changed his legal options. Is Bill sure about that? Absolutely. He handles all the town hall paperwork and no technical evaluator was ever hired. That means the suspension doesn't have proper legal grounds. Exactly. And Bill said something else. Sterling is pressuring the mayor to permanently cancel your permit. Nathan realized the time for a diplomatic solution had run out. If he wanted to save his project, he would have to act quickly and decisively. That night, he secretly met with Tyler, Jake, Sarah, and Dr. Harrison to discuss one last alternative. Everyone, I'll be straight with you. If we want to finish at least the first tunnel before winter, we have to keep working without official authorization. Everyone fell silent, understanding the implications of what Nathan was proposing. What would the consequences be? Sarah asked. For me, a possible fine and legal liability. For those who help me, probably warnings. And what are the chances of it working out? If we manage to finish the tunnel and it works during a real emergency, it will be very hard for the town hall to take drastic measures against the project. Dr. Harrison was the first to speak up. Nathan, as a doctor, I have an obligation to support any initiative that could save lives. Count me in. I'm in too, said Tyler. We've already invested too much to give up now. And me, added Jake. Work is work, permit or no permit. Sarah took longer to respond, since she had more to lose as a public employee. Sarah, you don't have to get directly involved, said Nathan. Just the fact that you don't report our work would already be a huge support. No, Nathan. If you're all going to risk everything for this project, I will too. Just tell me how I can help. With the group's support secured, Nathan devised a clandestine work plan. They would work only during the early morning hours, using silent tools and removing the excavated soil in small amounts during the day. Night work was harder and riskier, but they established a pace that allowed them to advance about 8 meters per night without making enough noise to arouse suspicion. Beatrice offered her home as a base of operations, providing coffee and food for the workers during breaks. At 72, she showed more courage and determination than many of the village's younger men. My young friends, if anyone comes asking questions, I'll tell them you're helping me with some repairs around the house, she said, smiling knowingly. After a week of night work, they had already completed more than half of the remaining distance to the grocery store. Nathan began to believe they would manage to finish the first tunnel before being discovered. That was when something no one had foreseen happened. Claire, his ex-wife, unexpectedly appeared in the village. Nathan found her at Martha's boarding house when he arrived for breakfast after another night of work. Claire, what are you doing here? I came to try to convince you to stop this madness before it's too late. Nathan sighed, knowing this conversation would be complicated. Claire had always been too practical a person to understand his more ambitious projects. Claire, this isn't madness. It's a serious project that can save lives. Nathan, I heard you're working illegally at night like a criminal. The comparison deeply irritated Nathan. I'm not a criminal, Claire. I'm an engineer trying to help his community. And throwing away your career in the process. You had a bright future in Chicago. I had a well-paying job in Chicago. A bright future is being able to make a difference in people's lives. They argued for over an hour without reaching any consensus. Claire couldn't understand why Nathan had given up financial stability to dedicate himself to a project she considered quixotic. Nathan, if you don't stop this, I'll go to the town hall and tell them everything about the illegal work. Claire's threat shocked Nathan deeply. Even knowing the marriage had ended badly, he never imagined she would be capable of actively sabotaging him. Claire, would you really do that? Yes, I would, for your own good. Nathan realized he would have to make an important decision about how to deal with this new threat. He couldn't allow Claire to destroy weeks of work and sacrifice. Claire, can you give me at least 3 days to finish the tunnel? Then we can calmly talk about my future. 3 days. It's all I need to complete the first tunnel. After that, you can do whatever you think is best. Claire reluctantly agreed, and Nathan found himself in a desperate race against time. He needed to finish the tunnel in 3 days, or he would lose the entire project. That night, he explained the situation to Tyler and Jake, who agreed to work practically without breaks to meet the deadline. We can work double shifts, Tyler suggested. Jake and I work from 11 at night to 5 in the morning. You rest, then come back to finish the details during the day. It was a risky plan to also work during the day, but Nathan saw no alternative. With 3 days ahead of them, they decided to take the risk. The first night of intensive work yielded 14 meters of excavation. They were exhausted but encouraged by the progress. Only about 20 meters remained to reach the grocery store. During the day, Nathan worked on installing the tunnel's lighting and ventilation system, while Tyler and Jake rested for the next night shift. It was during this daytime work that Sterling appeared at Mrs. Beatrice's house with 2 municipal guards. Mrs. Beatrice, I'm here to verify reports of illegal construction on your property. What illegal construction? I'm just making some repairs to the house with Nathan's help. Repairs underground? Nathan came out of the tunnel, covered in dirt and visibly tired. He knew he had been discovered, and there was no point in trying to deny it. Sterling, do you have a court order to be here? I don't need a court order to investigate a report of illegal construction. Actually, you do. This is Mrs. Beatrice's private property. Sterling was visibly annoyed that Nathan knew his legal rights. Nathan, you're working without authorization. That's a crime against public administration. Sterling, I'm working on Mrs. Beatrice's private property with her authorization. I'm not breaking any laws. The argument went on for several minutes, with Nathan questioning the legal basis of the investigation and Sterling trying to intimidate him with threats of arrest. In the end, the municipal guards left without taking any concrete action, but Nathan knew he had lost the advantage of secrecy. Mrs. Beatrice, I'm sorry for bringing this problem to you. Nathan, don't worry about me. I'm too old to be intimidated by these things. That night, knowing they could be interrupted at any moment, Nathan, Tyler, and Jake worked with even more intensity. They managed to advance another 50 feet, getting to within just 16 feet of the grocery store. The next morning, they found Mrs. Gertrude waiting for them with coffee and fresh bread. My dears, I heard noise down here during the early hours. Are you getting close to my grocery store? Very close, Mrs. Gertrude. Maybe by tomorrow we can complete the connection. And then, what happens when the mayor finds out you've finished the tunnel? Then we'll test whether it actually works, Nathan replied with a tired but determined smile. The last day of digging was the most tense of all. Nathan knew Sterling would probably come back with reinforcements and legal authorization to stop the work. He needed to finish before that happened. They worked from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, practically without breaks. When they finally opened the passage connecting Mrs. Beatrice's house to Mrs. Gertrude's grocery store, it was almost midnight. We did it, Tyler shouted, quickly silenced by Nathan. We did it, but now comes the hardest part, proving it works. The tunnel was complete, with lighting installed and ventilation working perfectly. Nathan insisted on being the first to go all the way through the passage, checking every detail of the construction. It's perfect, said Mrs. Gertrude when Nathan emerged in her grocery store. Clean, well lit, and easy to walk through. Now we need to hope the winter is harsh enough to prove the need for the tunnels, but not so harsh that it causes serious problems for those who aren't connected. 3 days later, the first snow began to fall over Pine Ridge. Nathan watched from the window of the boarding house with a mix of expectation and apprehension. Claire had followed through on her threat and reported the illegal work to the town hall, but now it was too late to stop the tunnel from being tested under real conditions. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The first snowstorm was moderate, accumulating about 8 inches of snow, but keeping the streets still passable with caution. Nathan knew he would need more severe conditions to fully demonstrate the usefulness of the tunnels. Mr. Arthur showed up at the boarding house with a court officer, bringing a notice to immediately cease any use of the tunnels built without authorization. Nathan, you are prohibited from using or allowing the use of this illegal construction, said the officer, handing over the document. And what if there's an emergency that requires using the tunnels to save lives? Asked Nathan. That will be evaluated case by the competent authority. Nathan kept the notice, knowing it would be difficult to comply with it if a real emergency happened. His priority would always be to preserve human lives, regardless of bureaucratic matters. The second blizzard arrived a week later, much more intense than the first. In a few hours, the village was covered by more than 1/2 meter of snow, with strong winds that made moving around outdoors extremely difficult. It was during this storm that the first emergency happened. Mrs. Beatrice felt severe chest pains in the early morning hours and managed to alert Mrs. Gertrude through the tunnel. The grocery store had the only reliable phone in the village, allowing Dr. Harrison to be called immediately. The doctor managed to reach Mrs. Beatrice using the tunnel, something that would have been impossible through the snow-covered streets with almost zero visibility. It's a mild heart attack. Diagnosed Dr. Harrison after examining the woman. I need medications that are in my office. Nathan offered to go get the medicine, using the tunnel to reach the grocery store, and from there following the streets to the doctor's house. The journey that would normally take 5 minutes on foot took almost an hour due to the storm, but it was only possible because the first part of the route was sheltered. Mrs. Beatrice fully recovered from the scare, but everyone involved knew that without the tunnels, the situation could have been much more serious. Dr. Harrison, without the tunnel, would she have received care? Asked Nathan the following morning, when the storm had passed. Honestly, very difficult. At that hour of the night with that blizzard, I probably wouldn't even know she was feeling unwell. The news of the rescue spread quickly through the village. Even people who had been critical of the project began to see it in a different light. Mike from the mechanic shop sought out Nathan the next day. Dude, I have to admit I was wrong about your tunnels. After what happened with Mrs. Beatrice, I realized they really can save lives. Mike, it's still just a tunnel connecting 2 houses. To work fully, we'd need to connect the entire village. And why don't we do that? Because the town hall prohibited any expansion of the project. Mike became thoughtful for a few moments. And what if the community itself funded the expansion? Each family would pay a share of the costs. Mike's suggestion was interesting, but Nathan knew the legal issue would still need to be resolved. Mike, even if we had the money, we'd still need official authorization to dig on several properties. But what if each property owner authorizes it individually? Nathan had never considered that possibility. If each homeowner gave individual permission for excavation on their property, maybe they could bypass the town hall's general prohibition. Mike, this could work legally, but it would be very complicated to coordinate. Why don't we talk to the folks and see if there's interest? Nathan agreed to evaluate the proposal, although still skeptical about the political viability of the project. He knew that Mr. Arthur and Sterling would do everything to prevent any expansion of the tunnels. During the following week, Mike and Sarah organized informal meetings in the residents' homes to discuss the possibility of expanding the project with community funding. The response was surprisingly positive. More than 30 families showed interest in participating, offering to contribute financially and allow excavations on their properties. Nathan, we've gathered enough payment commitments to build tunnels connecting nearly the whole town, said Sarah, showing a list with names and amounts. Sarah, this is incredible, But do you understand there will likely be political retaliation? We understand. But we also understand that this could be the difference between life or very difficult situations next harsh winter. Nathan was moved by the community's support, but also worried about the consequences these people could face. I'll accept the proposal, but with one condition. If there's any kind of political persecution against those who support the project, I'll stop the work immediately. We agree, replied Sarah on behalf of the group. With community funding secured, Nathan drafted a new technical design that would connect 15 of the town's 20 houses through an integrated network of tunnels. The system would be like an underground web, with multiple paths between the key points: the school, the grocery store, the medical clinic, and the most isolated residences. When the expanded project was presented publicly, the reaction from the town hall was immediate and furious. Mr. Arthur called an extraordinary meeting of the town council, expressly prohibiting any excavation on town properties, regardless of individual owner authorization. This measure aims to protect urban infrastructure and public safety, he declared to the few present at the meeting. Nathan was there and asked to speak. Mr. Arthur, I'd like to understand the technical basis for this prohibition. Was there any study on infrastructure risks? Nathan, I don't need to justify public safety measures to you. Actually, you do. I'm a licensed civil engineer, and I have the right to question technical decisions that affect projects in my field. The discussion stretched on for more than 2 hours, with Nathan systematically challenging every argument put forward by the town hall and demonstrating that there was no technical basis for the prohibition. In the end, it was clear the measure was purely political, but that didn't make it any less legally effective. Nathan left the meeting knowing he would have to find a new strategy to make the expanded project viable. He couldn't simply ignore an explicit municipal prohibition. It was Dr. Vance, the lawyer, who suggested the most elegant solution. Nathan, let's challenge the legality of the prohibition through the Department of Justice. An administrative measure that lacks proper technical basis can be considered an abuse of power. How long would that process take? Possibly a few months, but we can request an injunction to suspend the prohibition while the case is reviewed. And what are the chances of getting that injunction? Good, especially considering you've already proven the system's effectiveness by saving Mrs. Beatrice's life. Nathan decided to pursue the legal route, even knowing it would be long and costly. He needed to establish a precedent that would allow not only expanding the project in Pine Ridge, but also replicating it in other communities. While awaiting the legal proceedings, Nathan used the time to refine the technical design and seek support from other regional authorities. Teacher Collins managed to schedule a meeting with the Regional Secretary of Rural Development, who showed genuine interest in the project. Engineer Nathan, this kind of innovative solution is exactly what we need to strengthen our rural communities, said the Secretary after reviewing the technical drawings. Secretary, the problem isn't technical or financial, it's political. The local administration is blocking the project for reasons we can't understand. I can speak officially with the mayor about this. We have incentive programs for community infrastructure projects. The regional government's support significantly changed the local political dynamics. Arthur found himself caught between maintaining his opposition to the project and going against higher authorities who could affect other municipal programs. In a tense meeting with the regional secretary, the mayor was forced to explain his objections to the tunnel project. Secretary, our concern is purely with the safety of the residents. We have no guarantees that these excavations won't cause structural problems. Mayor Engineer Nathan presented all the necessary technical studies. What specific aspect of safety hasn't been adequately addressed? Arthur couldn't come up with convincing technical arguments, exposing the political nature of his opposition. Furthermore, the secretary continued, we're making available a special financing line for this project should the town hall show official interest. The offer of external funding for a project that had majority popular support put the mayor in an untenable political position. After 2 hours of meeting, he reluctantly agreed to revoke the ban and allow work to resume, provided all safety regulations were strictly followed. Nathan, you can restart your project, but any accident or problem will be entirely your responsibility, said Arthur, clearly displeased. I accept full technical responsibility for my projects, Nathan replied. It's always been that way. With the official authorization finally secured, Nathan was able to begin the most ambitious phase of the project, connecting all of Pine Ridge through an integrated network of tunnels. The work would be far more complex than the first tunnel, requiring precise coordination between multiple teams and properties. Nathan hired 4 more specialized workers and divided the project into 5 distinct phases. The first phase would connect the grocery store to the school and the medical clinic, creating a central triangle of essential services. The second phase would link the elderly residents' homes to this center. The following phases would expand the network to cover the entire village. Sarah coordinated the community logistics, ensuring that each family knew exactly when work would begin on their property and what would be needed from them. Dr. Harrison oversaw the health and safety aspects, making sure no worker got hurt and that working conditions were adequate. Gertrude turned her grocery store into the project's communications hub, where all information was centralized and distributed to the community. The work progressed quickly over 6 intense weeks. Nathan had refined the excavation techniques, and the team developed an impressive efficiency. By the time the first truly severe blizzard arrived in midwinter, there were already 12 houses connected to the basic tunnel network. Nathan knew that would be the system's ultimate test. The storm lasted 4 straight days, with snow accumulating over 1 meter deep and winds making any outdoor movement impossible. For the houses connected to the tunnels, it was a completely different experience from any previous winter. People could visit one another, pick up supplies at the grocery store, see Dr. Harrison when needed, and the children managed to keep attending school even on the harshest days. The 5 houses that weren't yet connected faced total isolation. 2 families lost electricity for 3 days and had to be rescued through the tunnel network, with connected residents providing temporary shelter. Nathan, without the tunnels, those families could have been in a very serious situation, said Dr. Harrison after helping with the rescue. And this is just the basic system. When it's complete, no one will be isolated during storms. The efficiency demonstrated by the tunnels during the severe blizzard definitively convinced the last skeptics in the village. The 3 families that hadn't yet joined the project immediately signed up for a connection. Even more importantly, word of the system's success reached other rural communities in the region. Nathan began receiving invitations to present the project in neighboring villages. Engineer Nathan, our community of Highwood Valley would like to hire your services for a similar project, said the representative of the first interested village. I'd be honored to help, but first I need to finish the work here in Pine Ridge. How long would it take to finish everything here? If there are no more political obstacles, about 2 months to connect the last homes. The prospect of replicating the project in other communities gave Nathan a new motivation. It was no longer just about helping his hometown, but about creating a model that could benefit thousands of people in the region. Sarah suggested documenting the entire process in detail to make future implementations easier. Nathan, if we're going to expand this to other communities, we need a technical manual and a political implementation guide. Excellent idea, Sarah. Could you coordinate the documentation of the community aspects while I handle the technical side? Of course, I've already talked to Collins about turning this into educational material that can be used in rural schools in the region. The project was becoming something much bigger than Nathan had initially imagined. From a local solution to a specific problem, it was becoming a model of rural innovation with the potential for regional impact. When the last connections were completed at the end of winter, all of Pine Ridge was integrated through the tunnel network. The system even included emergency connections to the main road, allowing ambulances and other essential services to reach the village even during the worst storms. The official opening ceremony was organized by the community itself, with the presence of the regional secretary, representatives from other villages interested in the project, and local journalists who wanted to document the innovation. A year ago, many of you doubted this idea, said Nathan during his speech. Today we have proof that when a community comes together around a common goal, it can accomplish extraordinary things. The speech was interrupted several times by applause, especially when Nathan thanked by name each person who had supported the project from the beginning. Dr. Harrison, who always prioritized lives over politics. Sarah, who turned resistance into support through education. Mrs. Gertrude, who offered her grocery store as the operations center. Mrs. Beatrice, who had the courage to be the first to bet on the idea. When he mentioned Mrs. Beatrice, Nathan had to pause for a few seconds to control his emotions. The 72-year-old lady was in the front row, smiling proudly as if it were her own achievement. "And most of all," continued Nathan, "I thank every family that invested their money and their trust in a project that many considered crazy." The ceremony ended with a group walk through the main tunnels, allowing everyone to see the final result of the work. Even people who had followed the construction were impressed by the complete system in operation. 2 months after the opening, Nathan received a phone call that would once again change the course of his life. "Engineer Nathan, this is the State Institute of Technology. We'd like to invite you to teach classes on community engineering in our graduate program." The offer was tempting and represented academic recognition for the work he had developed. Nathan asked for a few days to consider the proposal. That night, he had a long conversation with Sarah about his future. "Sarah, I've always dreamed of being a university professor, but I also don't want to abandon this work with rural communities." "Why not both? You could teach classes and at the same time coordinate university extension projects to replicate the tunnels in other villages." Sarah's suggestion made perfect sense. Nathan could use the academic platform to systematize and expand his community work. "Sarah, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Would you consider moving to the capital with me? You could coordinate the educational aspects of the extension projects." Sarah smiled, realizing Nathan was proposing much more than a professional partnership. "Nathan, are you offering me a job or something more?" "I'm offering a life together, building projects that make a difference for people like those in Pine Ridge. In that case, I accept both proposals." 6 months later, Nathan was established as a professor at the university, coordinating an extension program that had already implemented tunnel systems in 5 rural communities in the region. Sarah ran the educational sector of the program, developing teaching materials and training community leaders to replicate the model in their own villages. The original Pine Ridge project had become a national reference in rural innovation. Nathan received invitations to give lectures throughout the country, and there was even international interest in the model. During a visit to the village to evaluate improvements to the system, Nathan met Mr. Arthur, now former mayor, working at Mrs. Gertrude's grocery store. "Nathan, I wanted to apologize for having created so many difficulties for your project," he said, visibly embarrassed. "Mr. Arthur, sometimes resistance can even be positive. It forced me to think more carefully about every aspect of the project. Even so, I recognize that I was wrong. The tunnels really transformed our community for the better. And how are you adapting to working at the grocery store?" "Much better than I expected. Mrs. Gertrude is a much more easygoing boss than the politicians in the region." They laughed together, showing that even the greatest political disagreements can be overcome when positive results become undeniable. During the same visit, Nathan learned that Sterling had moved to another city after losing his councillor position in the following elections. The corruption in the snow removal contract had been investigated, and he faced legal proceedings. "It's impressive how things have changed in just 2 years," commented Sarah as they walked through the tunnels that were now part of the village's daily life. "Sarah, do you know what impresses me most? How people have completely embraced the system. It's no longer a novelty or curiosity. It's simply a normal part of their lives." Indeed, the tunnels had become so integrated into the community's routine that children played in them. Adults used them for social visits, even when there was no storm, and the elderly had gained an independence they hadn't had in years. Mrs. Beatrice, at 74 years old, visited the grocery store and school daily through the tunnels, staying active and socially connected in a way that would have been impossible in previous winters. "Nathan, my boy, you can't imagine how these tunnels changed my life," she said during a chance encounter in the underground system. "Before, I prepared myself to be isolated half the year. Now I live normally all year round." Conversations like this constantly reminded Nathan of why he had bet so much on that seemingly crazy project. It wasn't just about engineering or innovation. but about human dignity and quality of life. On the third anniversary of the project, the community organized a special celebration inside the tunnels themselves. The system had been expanded to include communal spaces, allowing community events even during the most severe storms. "Nathan, when you first mentioned the tunnels, I thought it was something out of a science fiction movie," said Mike during the celebration. "Today I can't imagine how we lived without them before." The celebration brought together not only the residents of Pine Ridge, but also representatives from other communities that had implemented similar systems. It was a celebration of how a simple idea can multiply and transform the lives of hundreds of families. During his speech at the celebration, Nathan reflected on the 3 years that had passed. "When I returned to Pine Ridge with this idea, I thought I was proposing a technical solution to a climate problem. Today I understand that I was proposing a new form of community. The tunnels not only protect us from the storms, they connected us in ways that didn't exist before. They created an underground solidarity that strengthens our solidarity on the surface." Sarah was 4 months pregnant with the couple's first child, and Nathan often imagined what it would be like for the child to grow up in a community where underground tunnels were perfectly normal. "Sarah, our daughter is going to grow up thinking every town has tunnels connecting the houses," he commented after the celebration. "And what's wrong with that? Maybe that's how it should be." The prospect of becoming a father was giving Nathan additional motivation to expand the university program. He wanted his daughter to grow up in a world where communities were more resilient and connected. In the 4th year of the project, Nathan received the invitation he considered the ultimate recognition of his work, presenting the community tunnel model at an international conference on rural innovation. "Sarah, it's in the northern capital, Norway, a country that has much more experience with snow and cold than we do. And are you nervous?" "A little. I'm going to present our Brazilian solution to experts who deal with much harsher winters than ours." "Nathan, our solution isn't just technical, it's social. And that aspect can be relevant anywhere in the world." Sarah was right. During the presentation in the northern capital, Nathan noticed that the participants' interest was less in the technical aspects of the tunnels and more in the community engagement methodology they had developed. "Professor Nathan, how did you manage to overcome local political resistance?" asked a Norwegian expert. "By demonstrating practical results and gradually building popular support, but mainly by always keeping the focus on human benefit, not technical innovation." The question was repeated in various forms throughout the conference. Experts from different countries wanted to understand how to replicate not just the tunnels, but the entire community implementation process. Nathan returned from the conference with invitations to implement similar projects in rural communities in Chile, Argentina, and even some European countries. "Sarah, I think we underestimated the international potential of our model." "Nathan, do you want to expand to other countries?" "I want to systematize our methodology so that others can implement it independently. Create a kind of global manual for community tunnels." The idea of global systematization led Nathan and Sarah to write a book about the Pine Ridge experience. The work took 2 years to complete and included technical, political, social, and economic aspects of the project. Underground Connections: How a Brazilian Village Revolutionized Community Life was published simultaneously in Portuguese, English, and Spanish, becoming an academic reference in several countries. The success of the book brought international visibility to Pine Ridge, which began receiving visitors from different continents interested in seeing the tunnel system firsthand. "Nathan, our town has become a tourist attraction," joked Mrs. Gertrude during one of Nathan's visits. "Last week, some Japanese visitors came here to photograph the tunnels." Academic and technical tourism brought an additional source of income to the community, with several families offering lodging and meals to visitors. Mrs. Martha turned her boarding house into an inn, specializing in hosting engineers and researchers, becoming a prosperous small business owner. "Nathan, when you first stayed here, I never imagined our town would become famous around the world." 5 years after the project began, Nathan was invited to return to Pine Ridge permanently to coordinate an international research center on rural innovation that would be established in the community itself. Sarah, it would be like coming full circle. We'd return to where it all started, but now to expand the work globally. And our daughter would grow up here, in a community you two built together. Little Audrey, a year and a half old, was already crawling through the tunnels as if they were the most natural thing in the world. To her, it was perfectly normal for houses to be connected underground. The decision to return was easy. Nathan and Sarah wanted their daughter to grow up in a real community, where people know each other and look out for one another. The research center was set up in a new building, obviously connected to the tunnel network, and began receiving researchers and graduate students from around the world. Professor Nathan, this center will become a kind of living laboratory for community innovation, said the university chancellor during the inauguration. That was always the idea. To make Pine Ridge an example that small communities can develop big solutions. On the 6th anniversary of the original project, Nathan made a point of organizing the celebration in the first tunnel he had built, connecting Mrs. Beatrice's house to the grocery store. Mrs. Beatrice, you were the first person to believe in the tunnel idea. How do you feel seeing how far we've come? Nathan, my dear, when you were a child, I could already tell you were different from the other boys, always observing, always thinking about how things could be better. You remember that? Of course. Your grandmother Evelyn always said you would be special, that you would do important things. She was right. Mentioning his grandmother always moved Nathan. The entire project had begun with a promise he made to himself after what she had gone through during that winter storm. Mrs. Beatrice, sometimes I feel like my grandmother would be proud of what we've built here. She would be, Nathan. And I'm sure she is, wherever she is now. During the ceremony, Nathan officially announced that Pine Ridge had been selected by the Global Alliance as a model resilient community, receiving international recognition for its capacity to adapt to climate challenges. This recognition isn't mine, said Nathan to the audience, which included regional authorities, international researchers, and, most importantly, every resident of the town. It belongs to every person who believed in a crazy idea and worked to make it a reality. Sarah, pregnant with their second child, watched her husband's speech with pride, imagining how she would tell their children about the early days of the project, when many people thought Nathan was wasting his time and money. After the ceremony, Nathan walked alone through the tunnels that now stretched across the entire town, reflecting on the journey since that first day when he had presented the idea at the town council. The system had evolved far beyond the original concept. It now included communal areas, underground libraries, even a small chapel for services during storms. More importantly, the tunnels had become a symbol that small communities can develop innovative solutions when they work together toward a common goal. Nathan stopped at the exact spot where he had dug the first spadeful of earth 6 years earlier. At that moment, he had been nervous and unsure whether the idea would work. Now he was surrounded by concrete evidence that it had worked beyond all expectations. The phone rang, interrupting his reflection. It was an invitation to present the project at a conference on climate change at the Global Alliance headquarters in New York. Sarah, they just invited me to speak at the Global Alliance about community adaptation to climate change. Nathan, are you going to accept? I will, of course. But this time, I want to bring Beatrice with me. She represents the spirit of this entire journey better than I do. The idea of taking Beatrice to New York initially seemed absurd to some, but Nathan insisted that her presence would be essential to show the human side behind the technical innovation. Beatrice, would you be willing to travel with me to New York and tell our story to representatives from various countries? Nathan, my boy, at 76 years old, I thought I had no more surprises in life. But of course I'm up for this adventure. The presentation at the Global Alliance was an extraordinary success. Nathan explained the technical and political aspects of the project, but it was Beatrice's heartfelt testimony about how the tunnels had transformed her daily life that had the greatest impact on the audience. Before the tunnels, I used to prepare myself to hibernate like an animal during the winter, she said in her simple Portuguese, as it was simultaneously translated. Now I live all year round like a real person. After the presentation, Nathan and Beatrice were surrounded by representatives from different countries interested in adapting the model to their own rural communities. An official from the Canadian government was especially persistent. Professor Nathan, we have isolated Indigenous communities that face similar problems during the winter. Could your model be adapted to our reality? Certainly, but it would be essential to adapt not only the technique, but the entire methodology of community engagement. Each culture has its own ways of making collective decisions. The trip to New York marked the beginning of a new phase of the project, intercultural adaptation of the model to different geographic and social contexts. Nathan began working as an international consultant, helping communities in different countries develop their own versions of underground connection systems adapted to their specific needs. Sarah coordinated the educational side of these international projects, developing intercultural communication methodologies and teaching materials adapted to different contexts. The research center in Pine Ridge became an international hub, receiving delegations and researchers from dozens of countries interested in studying the Brazilian model. Nathan, our village has more foreign visitors than some capital cities, joked Dr. Harrison, now 80 years old, but still active in tending to the researchers who arrived with health problems during their visits. In the 7th year of the project, Nathan received a call he considered the greatest honor of his professional career. He had been nominated for the Global Peace Prize for his work in developing community solutions for climate adaptation. Sarah, I know it's practically impossible to win, but the nomination alone is incredible recognition of our work. Nathan, regardless of the outcome, this proves that the crazy idea of connecting houses with tunnels has become a globally recognized solution. The Nobel nomination brought international media attention to Pine Ridge. Journalists from around the world visited the village to document the project that had begun as a local solution and become a global model. During an interview with the Global News Network, Nathan was asked what he considered the most important aspect of the project. The most important thing isn't the tunnels themselves, but the proof that small communities can develop big solutions when they work together. This can be replicated anywhere in the world for any kind of challenge. Although he didn't win the Nobel, the nomination internationally solidified the reputation of the Pine Ridge model as a reference in community innovation. Nathan began to be regularly invited as a consultant by international development organizations, but he always kept his base in the village, turning down tempting offers to permanently move to large urban centers. Sarah, our place is here. This is where it all started, and this is where we want our kids to grow up. Audrey, at 3 years old, and Bill, at 6 months, were already part of the 3rd generation of children growing up, considering the tunnels a normal part of a community. Nathan, imagine what it will be like for them to explain to kids from other cities that not every village has tunnels connecting the houses, said Sarah, watching Audrey play with other children in the underground playground that had recently been built. The 10th anniversary of the project was celebrated with an entire week of events, including academic conferences, cultural performances, and technical visits from delegations from 15 countries. The main ceremony took place in the underground auditorium that had been excavated specifically for large community and academic events. 10 years ago, many of you thought I was crazy when I proposed connecting our homes through tunnels, said Nathan to an audience of 300 people, including international officials and all the residents of the village. Today, Pine Ridge is visited by people from more than 40 countries. Our model has been replicated on 6 continents, and hundreds of rural communities have improved their quality of life using adaptations of our techniques. During his speech, Nathan made a point of mentioning again every person who had been instrumental in the early days of the project, many of whom were present at the ceremony. Miss Beatrice, who at 82 years old remains our greatest international advocate for community tunnels. Dr. Harrison, who saved lives through the tunnels and now trains young rural doctors at our training center. Sarah, who turned resistance into support and now coordinates similar programs in dozens of countries. Emotion took over the auditorium when Nathan concluded, "But the most important thing of all isn't the awards, the international recognition, or the replications of the project. The most important thing is that we proved we should never give up on an idea just because other people don't understand it at first. If you believe you have a solution to a real problem in your community, persist. Explain with patience, demonstrate with examples, and above all, always keep your focus on the human benefit your idea can create. Because in the end, the difference between a crazy idea and a revolutionary innovation is simply someone having the courage to put it into practice. Nathan's speech was interrupted several times by prolonged applause, especially when he thanked the community for believing in him when few did. After the ceremony, Nathan walked through the tunnels with Sarah and the children, reflecting on how a simple idea had turned into such a profound change in so many people's lives. Sarah, do you think our story could inspire other people to persist in their own ideas? Nathan, our story is already inspiring. I receive letters from young engineers all over the world saying that our example encouraged them to propose innovative solutions in their own communities. Indeed, the project's educational impact had become as important as its practical impact. Universities included the Pine Ridge case in their engineering, public administration, and community development curricula. Nathan had received honorary doctorate degrees from 6 universities in 4 countries, but he still preferred to be called simply Nathan, the tunnel engineer. At the end of the walk, they reached the first tunnel, the one that connected Beatrice's house to the grocery store. Nathan stopped at the exact spot where he had dug the first shovelful of dirt 11 years earlier. Sarah, sometimes I still can't believe that first dig led to all of this. Nathan, you always knew it would. That's why you insisted so much when everyone doubted you. Actually, I had hope, not certainty. The certainty only came when we saved Beatrice's life during that first blizzard. At that moment, Audrey ran up to them, carrying a small toy shovel. Daddy, can I help build new tunnels? Nathan laughed because the question perfectly summed up how the project had become a natural part of the village's identity. Audrey, you can definitely help. But first, you need to study hard to understand how to build safe and useful tunnels. I'll study hard. I want to build tunnels that help people, just like you do. The innocent promise from his 3-year-old daughter deeply touched Nathan, reminding him of how the next generation would grow up considering natural the kind of community innovation that he had been forced to fight so hard to implement. Sarah, our daughter will probably grow up thinking it's normal for communities to organize themselves to solve their own problems with creative solutions. And what's wrong with that? Maybe that's how it should be. On the 12th anniversary of the project, Pine Ridge was officially recognized by the World Heritage Council as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity in the category of innovative practices of community development. The recognition represented the definitive international consecration of the model, but Nathan made a point of remembering that the original goal had never been to win awards or recognition. The goal was always simple: to ensure that no family would be left isolated during winter storms, he said during the ceremony receiving the World Heritage Council title. Everything else that happened, the international recognition, the replications, the awards, are positive consequences, but they weren't the main goal. During the same ceremony, Beatrice, now 84 years old, was honored as Guardian of the Project's Memory, recognition for having been the first resident to support the idea, and for continuing to welcome international visitors interested in learning about the early days of the initiative. My young Nathan, she said during her thank you speech, when you told me you wanted to build tunnels connecting the houses, I didn't quite understand how it would work, but I understood that you wanted to help elderly people like me. Today, at 84, I live every day knowing that if I get sick during a storm, there will always be someone nearby to help me through the tunnels. That is priceless. Beatrice's testimony was broadcast live to dozens of countries and went viral on international social media, being translated into more than 20 languages. Nathan realized that Beatrice's personal story had become more powerful than all the technical aspects of the project in explaining why the tunnels were important. Inspired by this feedback, he decided to write a second book, this time focusing on the human stories behind the technical innovation. Underground Voices. The people behind the Pine Ridge tunnels included detailed interviews with every resident of the village about how the project had changed their personal lives. The book became an international bestseller, especially popular among readers interested in stories of overcoming adversity and community innovation. One of the most touching stories was that of Mr. Arthur himself, the former mayor who had been the project's biggest initial opponent. "At first, I saw the tunnels as a threat to the established order," he said in the interview. "I couldn't understand how anyone would spend so much money on something that seemed unnecessary. Today, I work at the grocery store that is connected by the tunnels, and I see daily how they make life easier for everyone. I learned that sometimes resistance to change comes from fear, not reason." Mr. Arthur's honesty in admitting his past mistakes became one of the most quoted passages in the book, especially in educational contexts about change management and community leadership. On the 15th anniversary of the project, Nathan was surprised by an initiative he hadn't expected: the creation of an international foundation to promote similar projects in rural communities around the world. "Professor Nathan, we have gathered resources from various international organizations to create the Pine Ridge Foundation for Rural Innovation," announced the World Bank representative during a ceremony at Global Alliance headquarters. "The foundation will be headquartered right here in your village, and you will be the international technical director, coordinating community adaptation projects in dozens of countries." The offer represented the possibility of globally expanding the work Nathan had developed, but he asked for time to consider the family and personal implications. "Sarah, accepting this position would mean traveling much more, coordinating projects on different continents. Do you think it's worth it?" "Nathan, I think it's time for you to decide whether you want to be the Nathan of Pine Ridge or the Nathan of the world. Both options are valid. And you, what do you prefer?" "I prefer to be by your side, wherever that is. But I confess I like the idea of our children growing up, seeing their father work to improve people's lives in different countries." Nathan accepted the position of technical director of the foundation, but negotiated for the headquarters to remain in Pine Ridge and for him to be able to develop the international work from his base in the village. The decision proved to be the right one. Over the following 3 years, the Pine Ridge Foundation supported the implementation of community connection systems in 127 rural villages in 42 countries. Each project was adapted to local needs and characteristics, but all followed the fundamental principles developed in the original experience: community engagement, local leadership, technically simple but socially sophisticated solutions. "Nathan, our model is being used from villages in Siberia to communities in the mountains of Peru," said Sarah, reviewing reports from the international projects. "And the most interesting part is seeing how each culture adapts the basic idea to its own needs and traditions." Indeed, the cultural adaptations had become a fascinating aspect of the international work. Communities in Japan created tunnels adorned with underground gardens. Villages in Iceland integrated geothermal heating systems into the tunnels. Villages in India developed connections that included spaces for community religious practices. On the 20th anniversary of the original project, Pine Ridge organized an international congress that brought together representatives from all 127 communities that had implemented versions of the model. The event lasted an entire week and was broadcast online to dozens of countries. Nathan considered it the most thrilling moment of his entire career. "Folks, when I started digging the first tunnel 20 years ago, I never imagined I'd be standing here today speaking to representatives of communities from every continent," he said during his opening speech. "But the most important thing isn't the number of countries or projects. The most important thing is knowing that thousands of families now have a better, safer, and more connected life because of something that started as a crazy idea in a Brazilian village." During the conference, Miss Beatrice, now 92 years old, was honored as the International Matriarch of Community Tunnels. Representatives from different countries brought traditional gifts and video testimonials from people who had benefited from the projects. "Miss Beatrice," said a young engineer from Peru, "you have no idea, but your courage in supporting the first tunnel inspired our community in the Andes to believe that we too could connect our homes during snowstorms." Hearing testimonials like those moved Nathan and made him realize the project had completely surpassed his original expectations. It was no longer just about a technical solution, but about being a global symbol that small communities can develop big solutions. At the close of the conference, Nathan announced his decision to gradually step back from international activities in order to dedicate himself fully to mentoring the next generation of community innovators. "I want to spend my last few years of active work teaching young engineers and community leaders how to develop their own crazy ideas," he said, "because I'm certain there are thousands of Nathan Millers out there in the world, just waiting for encouragement to put their ideas into practice." The shift toward more educational work allowed Nathan to spend more time with Audrey, now 15, and Bill, 12, who had grown up as children of the tunnels and developed unique perspectives on community innovation. "Dad, at school, when we talk about our village, the other kids think we're making stuff up," Audrey said during a family dinner. "Why's that, sweetheart?" "Because they think it's impossible for a small village to have become famous all over the world just because of tunnels connecting houses." Nathan laughed, realizing how the story he had lived so intensely could seem unbelievable to those who hadn't followed along. "Audrey, that gives me an idea. How would you and Bill like to help me write a book telling our story from your perspective, since you grew up here?" "That would be cool, Dad. We could tell people what it's like to grow up in a village where everyone knows each other through the tunnels and where visitors come from every country to see how we live." The family book project took up the following year. Audrey and Bill interviewed other young people who had grown up in Pine Ridge and in some of the other communities that had implemented similar systems. Growing up underground, the next generation of community tunnels became a surprising success, especially among young people interested in social innovation and community development. The book inspired the creation of an international youth exchange program, allowing teenagers from different connected communities to visit one another and learn about local adaptations of the model. "Nathan, our kids are becoming international ambassadors for community tunnels," said Sarah, watching Audrey give a video conference presentation to students in Finland. "It's amazing how the next generation has completely embraced the idea that communities can and should develop creative solutions to their own problems." On the 25th anniversary of the project, Pine Ridge received the highest honor Nathan believed possible. It was chosen by the Global Alliance as the permanent headquarters of the International Center for Community Innovation. The center would be responsible for coordinating, researching, and disseminating innovations developed by rural communities around the world, not just tunnels, but any kind of creative solution to local problems. "Nathan, this means your village has officially become the world capital of community innovation," said the Secretary General of the Global Alliance during the center's opening ceremony. "Mr. Secretary General, Pine Ridge is just one among thousands of communities that can develop great ideas. Our advantage was having the luck that someone persisted with an idea until it worked." During the ceremony, Nathan gave his last major public speech before retiring for good. "Friends, 25 years ago I came back to this village with an idea many considered crazy, connecting every home through underground tunnels. Today, hundreds of communities in dozens of countries use variations of that idea. Thousands of families have better, safer lives. And a small Brazilian village has become an international symbol of community innovation. But the most important lesson in all of this isn't about tunnels. It's about perseverance. It's about believing that a good idea can overcome any initial resistance if you stay focused on the human benefit it can bring. Each of you has some idea that could improve life in your community. Don't give up on it just because others don't understand it at first. Explain it patiently, demonstrate it with examples, and above all, never lose sight of why your idea matters. Because the difference between the world we have and the world we want to have might rest in one of those ideas you carry, waiting only for the courage to put it into practice. Nathan's speech was broadcast live to over 100 countries and later translated into 42 languages, becoming one of the most watched motivational talks in internet history. In the months following his retirement, Nathan finally devoted himself to a personal project he had been putting off for years, thoroughly documenting the entire technical evolution of the Pine Ridge tunnels for future generations of engineers. The work resulted in a 3-volume technical encyclopedia that became required reference in community and civil engineering courses around the world. But Nathan also made time for activities he had neglected during those years of intense work: fishing in the local creek, gardening in his backyard, and long walks through the tunnels just for pleasure, not for work. Sarah, for the first time in 25 years, I can walk through the tunnels without thinking about technical improvements or expansions. I can simply enjoy what we built. And how does that feel? Proud, fulfilled, and above all, at peace, knowing the work will carry on through all the people we trained over these years. Audrey, now 20 years old and studying engineering at the State Institute of Technology, had decided to specialize in community innovation, following in her father's footsteps, but with her own style and perspectives. Bill, at 17, showed more interest in the educational and social aspects of the work, planning to study pedagogy with a focus on rural education. Nathan, our children will carry on the work, but in ways we probably can't even imagine, said Sarah, watching Audrey present her own innovative ideas to her university classmates. That's the most rewarding part of it all, knowing we inspired a new generation that will go far beyond what we managed to accomplish. On the 30th anniversary of the project, Pine Ridge organized not a celebration, but a 3-day symposium on the future of community innovation, focused on the ideas of the new generation. Nathan participated only as a spectator, watching young people from different countries present innovative projects inspired by the Pine Ridge model, but adapted to contemporary challenges such as extreme climate change, rural digital connectivity, and energy sustainability. Sarah, I'm seeing 20-year-olds presenting ideas more advanced than anything I could have imagined when I started. Nathan, they can go further because you paved the way. They've proven that a small community can develop big solutions. During the symposium, Nathan was surprised by Audrey's presentation, which proposed a radical evolution of the traditional tunnels, intelligent underground systems that would automatically adapt to climate change using sensor technology and artificial intelligence. Dad, your generation proved that tunnels can connect communities physically, she said during her presentation. Our generation wants to prove they can connect them digitally, environmentally, and even energetically. Audrey's presentation received a standing ovation and immediate interest from international organizations willing to fund a pilot project. Nathan felt moved and proud when he realized that his daughter had not only fully understood his work, but was prepared to take it to a level he had never imagined. Audrey, do you want to implement this pilot project right here in Pine Ridge? He asked after the presentation. Of course, Dad, where else could I test an evolution of your tunnels? Audrey's decision to keep innovating in Pine Ridge itself ensured that the town would maintain its leading position in community innovation for the next generation. Nathan realized that the time had come to officially transfer the project's legacy to Audrey, recognizing that she had the vision and competence to take the work far beyond what he had achieved. Audrey, would you like to take over the technical coordination of the International Center for Community Innovation? Dad, it would be an honor. But I want to keep you on as a consultant. I still have a lot to learn. The generational transition was made official in a simple but symbolic ceremony in which Nathan handed Audrey the original tools he had used to dig the first tunnel 30 years ago. Audrey, these tools dug the first meter of the tunnels that changed our community. Now it's up to you and your generation to keep digging the future. At 65, Nathan finally retired completely, dedicating himself to writing his memoirs and enjoying the quiet life in a town that had become very different from the one he had returned to 3 decades earlier. Pine Ridge now had a population of nearly 1,000 residents, including researchers, students, and families who had moved there specifically to take part in the innovative community. The original tunnels had expanded into a complex system that included underground laboratories, digital libraries, co-working spaces, and even a small convention center for international academic events. Sarah, our town has become a small city, but it managed to keep the community spirit it always had. Nathan, I think that happened because the growth was based on values, not just economic opportunities. People who come to live here come because they believe in the philosophy of community innovation. During his last active years, Nathan witnessed Audrey successfully implement the world's first smart tunnel system, which became a model for similar projects in more than 20 countries. Bill, who held a degree in education, created an international educational program that took students from Pine Ridge to learn about other innovative communities around the world, strengthening a global network of young people interested in community development. On the 40th anniversary of the original project, Nathan was honored with the most significant recognition he could have imagined. Pine Ridge was officially declared by the World Heritage Council as the first living heritage community for humanity, recognizing not just the tunnels but the entire philosophy of community innovation that had developed there. Nathan, 40 years after digging the first tunnel, your idea has become a heritage of humanity, said Sarah during the ceremony. Sarah, the idea was never mine. It belonged to the community that believed in it and worked to make it a reality. I was just the catalyst. During his speech at the ceremony, Nathan reflected on the entire journey, since that first day when he had presented the idea at the town council. Friends, if someone had told me 40 years ago that a small Brazilian village would become a heritage of humanity because of tunnels connecting houses, I would have thought that person was dreaming. But I learned that the most impossible dreams are sometimes just good ideas, waiting for someone brave enough to turn them into reality. The greatest pride of my life is not the awards or recognitions we received. It is knowing that we proved that small communities can have big ideas and that those ideas can change the world when people work together to make them happen. I hope our story inspires others to never give up on their ideas, no matter how crazy they might seem at first, because the difference between a crazy idea and an innovation that changes the lives of thousands of people may simply be someone willing to dig the first hole in the ground. End of story. So what did you think of this incredible journey of Nathan and Pine Ridge? A story that began with mockery and became a worldwide inspiration. Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most and whether you know any community that could benefit from innovative ideas like this one. Leave your like to support stories that show how perseverance can transform the impossible into reality. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories about people who change their communities through determination and love for their neighbors.